Here's one more video in the series dedicated to Vladimir Kramnik's games and the theme of the pawn breakthrough. This is Kramnik's game from 1999 against Illescas. Kramnik is again playing with the white pieces, and again he has space advantage, which is something he's really good at handling, the positions with the space advantage. So it's white to move here, and it seems like, he's not quite making much progress. His bishop is bad, his knights are, biting into his own pawns. Maybe black will even take over the initiative here at some point. But Kramnik managed to spot a weakness in black's position, and the fact that these pawns are slightly weak, they're a little unstable, and the fact that the black's pieces are still running out of squares at the moment. So he came up with a very interesting move. He decided to leave his pawn on d5, under-protected, and he played pawn to c5. So what that does is that it really undermines this pawn chain on e5 and d5, and it exploits the awkward placement of black's pieces. So Illescas took, and of course if Kramnik just takes back, then the position might just simplify and kind of peter out, right? There probably won't be much for Kramnik in this. So instead he first plays pawn to d6, and that really kicks this knight, right? So he would have a dream position if Illescas first goes away and then he takes, and just these pawns are very strong, the knights are completely out of the game, the pawn on b7 is weak, so this would be Kramnik's dream. So of course Illescas first goes knight e6, and now one more slightly unexpected move. It seems very unclear, what is Kramnik getting out of this, right? If he just goes takes, well then black takes, and white's got nothing. That d pawn isn't really going very far. So instead Kramnik goes knight to d3, and that really explains his idea. He wanted to attack these d5 and e5 pawns and get some, strong pawn center. So black really has no way of defending this pawn. That is the point. And if he goes like this, well then white's probably just going to recapture back, kick this knight away, and then take on e5. So black has not much choice. He has to take, and now white takes. And again, all these moves, they're kind of played with a gain of time. Now that bishop is vulnerable, now that bishop is attacked, and it's not easy for black to move. So black goes knight c5, that defends the bishop one more time, tries to get the knight out, but Kramnik very calmly just attacks that knight, and he's got not many good squares. So the knight goes to the edge of the board. Now Kramnik goes knight d3. The knight's not just going back and forth, he captured this important pawn. Now the pawn center will start rolling. And black's pieces still don't have very many good squares. That's the interesting part. So rook e8 tries to stop it, but the pawn just goes forward. And now Illescas, realizing that if he retreats, he'll probably get steamrolled here. There's, these pawns are really dangerous. For example, probably if he goes knight g4, then maybe at some point bishop. That would be bad. He's probably just going to get kicked with... Well, first white's going to defend it, and he's going to kick away this bishop, and then the pawns will advance. So he doesn't want that to happen, so he starts to stir some complications. So he goes bishop f5. And Kramnik could here take that knight, and this is still quite good for him because the pawns are rolling forward. This would be quite promising. But instead he plays it slightly differently. He wants to keep the connected passed pawns in the center. And now he's got these very strong pawns, and black is unable to recapture one of them because then the d pawn is going to promote. So he played knight c5 instead, trying to blockade the pawns. But the pawns are still going. It's important that black is still unable to stop them. Now there's no good way to capture it without losing material. Of course, he can't ignore those pawns, so he has to take, and now white goes pawn to d7, and the queen is, threatening to promote. So if black takes, then Kramnik takes back, and he's up rook, which is a lot. So black instead has to retreat the rook with tempo, but white attacks the rook back with tempo. And now when black takes, he attacks the bishop with tempo, and black has no choice. He can't let that pawn promote, so he has to take it back, and now Kramnik wins the piece. So in return for these strong passed pawns that white obtained, he now obtained an extra piece. And, you know, black has gained a lot of pawns in the meantime, but he's got these two double pawns, and the pawns are not good enough, basically, to compensate for the piece. So eventually Kramnik very carefully blockades, you know, the pawns. He gains some pawns of his own, and this is not good enough for black. His knight is trapped on the edge of the board, and he's down a piece. So the pieces turn out to be stronger than the 3 pawns that black has. And eventually Kramnik brings us home. He does not want to exchange any pawns, and he keeps as many pawns on the board as possible. The b pawn now is blockaded, and the knight is still completely without moves. So, you know, given this miserable situation, of course black had to resign. So the interesting part of the game is, of course, how Kramnik came up with this move c5. And this breakthrough is based on several kind of features of the position. The extra space, the clumsiness of the black pieces, you know, the vulnerability of the black pawn chain in the center, as well as Kramnik's own desire to free up his pieces that seem to be doing nothing. And he so to speak, was probably talking to his pieces, asking them, where do you want to go? How do you want to get activated? And then it turned out that, you know, playing c5 and attacking these black pawns is really the best way to activate the knight and even make the bishop useful. So it's quite an instructive game from Kramnik.